everyone.
Hi, everybody.
I am so is Molly. We are so happy that we are doing this. I mean, we've been wanting to talk to Roody for eons.
Oh my God. This is like, I have never been more excited for an episode, and now we're at, 17 episodes? Because we've been wanting to do this with him for so long. And also, the response we got to Jordan Schomer's episode, our astrologer, those were the two that we were the most excited about. Jordan's was our most popular. So if you liked that one, which apparently most of you did, this is right up your alley.
Yeah. So Roody is one of our really good friends. We used to work with him. And he is a shaman in training. He's a shaman. Like he plays it down, but he is so professional and articulate and amazing. He's also a spiritual catalyst. And he's here to talk to us about everything, about like how he became a shaman, you know, how he listens to his spiritual guides, his angels, the difference between them, if there is one, his diet, his lifestyle, ayahuasca trips, which are very important if you want to kind of teach yourself how to get to that next level, how to teach yourself to listen to your intuition, because I mean, especially now in where we're at, no matter where you are in life, when you're in that place where you really need to just sit and listen to yourself, you can change so much about your habits and where your life takes you, and it's so important. And he breaks it down so well.
He talks about our, the evolution of self. And now more than ever, like Alissa said, this is a time we all have the time to do this. We're all sick of Instagram challenges and drinking and sleeping all day. And so now we're left with just self-evolution. And he offers insight into where to begin for people who aren't shamans, personal anecdotes, every single thing you could ask for. And we will have him back, because I promise you at the end of this, you're going to want more.
Yeah, so without further ado, here's Roody. Roody! So we're recording now, so we're jumping right into it. Roody, oh my God, I am so happy you're here. We are so lucky to have you. It's unreal.
Honored.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely honored. Like, thank you for even thinking to have me on the show.
This has been like weeks and weeks of Alissa and I, because we knew we were going to have you on and we didn't know when it was going to be. And we're just every 4 days, we're like, I can't wait for Roody's episode. People are going to freak out. I can't wait for Roody.
So Roody, you just got back from Brazil. Well, not just got back. We're still in a quarantine, obviously. Check out we're on Zoom right now. If you're listening to our podcast, please check us out on YouTube, because we're recording everything via there. So we are in a quarantine, but Roody was in Brazil right before this started. So talk to us about that.
Wow, Brazil it's an incredible, amazing country. Like, everybody out there is just so sexy, and it's hot, and there's an energy in the air, and it's a country itself where the history, like, it's a very magical country, right? Very magical continent. You know, the people over there are either in Santeria or Yoruba or Umbanda, and it's very musically driven. So people are dancing and singing all the time, and it's hot and sexy, and it's this combination of spirituality but just sexiness, and it just has this energy that you can literally, like, there's electricity in the air.
Yeah.
Just really, it's like you can feel the vibration, and just the it's literally like you're swimming in excitement. It's just there's always something about to pop. It's hard to put into words.
But you were there for shamanic training? Shamanic?
Yeah.
Am I saying that right?
Yeah. Specifically, right? The main shamanic training is centered around becoming an ayahuasca shaman, right? The shaman that I work with, we sit in ayahuasca ceremonies, and so the foundation of my training revolves around learning how to troubleshoot and handle any situations or issues that might come up during an ayahuasca ceremony. And so
goal to lead others in those ceremonies eventually.
Yeah, eventually, yeah. And it's a lot more to it than that, but yeah, to simply put, that's the easiest way to round it up, for sure.
Because there's a lot of, I've known you for, I guess, a couple of years now, and I ask you about this stuff all the time, and I still have questions. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners who have never considered what a shaman is? I know that's a broad and vague question, but at the same time, I know if you could just broadly talk about it touches on so many things, so many aspects of spirituality and human life and healing and readings. And can you kind of just go over it for people who might not know what it entails?
Absolutely, right? Like the word itself, the word shaman, it's that itself is rooted in history because nobody knows who used it first. Nobody knows where it actually really originated from. But simply put, what a shaman, like a shaman, what a shaman would be, and what a shaman is, like in the past, a shaman would have been your psych. Like if you were in a village, the shaman would have been off to the outskirts of the village, and he would have been the wise man. That would have been somebody who you would go to in the past to find out when it was going to rain, so when it was a good time to plant your crops. If you had dreams that needed to be interpreted, you would go to the shaman, and he would tell you what your dreams meant. He would also, if you had some kind of issue, whether be it physical or mental, the shaman would be somebody you would go speak to. So he was also a healer. He was also a psychologist. He was just a lot of, like today, shaman are also called medicine carriers. They're called witch doctors. They're mystics. They're psychics. They're mediums. They're empaths. You know, there are a lot of different
It
things.
encompasses a lot of different quote unquote careers, but it's like basically you're in touch with source on a deeper level and you're able to heal. I don't know, I guess connect with others
Yeah, well said. You know,
earthly plane.
yeah, yeah. I mean, ultimately, that's what it is, right? A shaman is somebody who's really like you develop a degree of sensitivity to everything, and so it really like the shamanic training is really teaching you to understand that this thing called existence, what we call reality, is really happening on so many different layers, right? Like we're all very accustomed to all our senses, like smell and sight, right? But a shaman would develop something that would be called like a sixth sense, right? Which would be the Hindu mystics called it the subtle realm, right? Or the spiritual realm or the astral realm, which is literally more commonly referred to as like the fourth or the fifth dimension, right? Like we live in the dimension where you can touch and see and talk. It's known as the third dimension. And the shamanic training, or anybody who's an empath or a psychic or a mystic or a clairvoyant, is somebody who will typically it taps into higher dimensions or these other dimensions outside of 3D reality, or what we know as the third dimension. And so a shaman is somebody who goes into that. When you go to sleep at night, right, you go into what is called the astral realm. And that's predominantly where a lot of that stuff happens, is in the astral. And so a shaman is somebody who either naturally or through way of training has developed the ability to go into the astral realm and pull information from it, or right, or receive, or actually be there. It's something that's happening all the time, even now as we're talking. It's not like these realms are really separate from each other. They're all like interpenetrating each other, so you could say. So a shaman is just somebody who is able to pick up those signals.
That remind because you said either naturally or in training. I'm sure it's a conjunction of both usually, but for you, like how in the world, how were you raised in a way that guided you toward this, or how did you even come to this? Did you have these gifts that you didn't know what they were or what to do with from a young age?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah. I can think back to a moment where I was 4 years old and I was sitting in my living room. Back then, my parents, so I was born in Haiti, right? To give you a little bit of background, and my family comes from a long line of Haitian mystics on my mother's side. And
Oh,
so, yeah, so my mother would have had what they would call the gift. She got it from her grandmother. My grandmother was much more heavy
I didn't
into
know
it.
that.
Yeah, yeah. So and that's typically the way it works, right? Typically, the a shamanic initiate would be, especially in the like some of the more indigenous lineages, would be somebody who is what they would call is born with the gift, even though according to others like Alan Kardec or Chico Xavier, we all have the gift. But for some people, it's more pronounced than others, right? Like it just comes out a little bit more baked, you know?
Yeah.
And so yeah, so from an early age, I was just really like childhood was very interesting for me because whereas a lot of people have imaginary friends, right? For me, especially in the beginning, it took me a few years to realize that I was seeing things that other people weren't seeing. For the longest time, I thought everybody was seeing it.
I've heard this from people who have
Wow.
like that, where they like remember a point, they really think that's how everybody is. And then some people, it's not until adulthood that they are like, wait, you don't, this isn't normal.
Yeah, yeah. Like luckily for me, like growing up Haitian, it was pretty common, and so because as a child, it would very much like I would often be having conversations, and to an outsider, it would look like, oh, this kid is talking to himself or he's talking to his imaginary friend, but they would be very like the conversations would be really intense, and it would be a lot of words, and so like nowadays we're used to it because people have their
Right.
their wireless headphones, and so
Yeah, yeah.
seeing somebody talking out and having a very animated conversation is very commonplace. But back then, it would if had I've grown up in any other household, I'm sure they would have had me, and they did actually, because almost have me medicated, right? Well, just because like what now is called ADD was something that I had as a kid, and so growing up, doing the visiting, doing the regular doctor visits or being in school or in class, like I would definitely have teachers who would call my parents and kind of be like, all right, so Rudy is, he talks to himself a lot. He's often in the corner and talking to somebody, and so there were some people who were outside of my family who thought it was strange, who thought that I wasn't developing like a regular child, because I would spend a lot of time off to the side, or I'd be having a conversation with, like, let's say my kindergarten grade, God bless her soul, right, Miss Pandicio, my kindergarten teacher, and would turn midway through the conversation and entertain, or if I was talking to you one on one, which to you, but for me, there would be somebody to your right or to your left who would be interjecting in the conversation. And so I would respond to that as a child. I'd be like, oh, and then it took me a while to realize that the actual human person that I was talking to was not in the conversation. And even before that, it took me a few years, especially in my formative years, right? Like before, like up until the age of 7, of being able to tell the difference between who was an actual person and who was not an actual person.
Really?
You know, you develop it.
Visually, it's that real to you.
Yeah, definitely. My mom, one of my favorite stories that my mom loves to, well, she doesn't share it anymore, but back in the day, there was a there was a moment where, when I was probably almost 6, right? This would have been right before we moved to Florida, because when I came to from I moved from Haiti, I moved to Chicago, where so my mom was coming home from work, and at that time my grandmother would be the one who would be babysitting while my mom was working, and so my grandmother would be off doing her own thing, and she'd leave me to my own devices, and so there was one point in time where I was watching TV, and as would often happen, as was what often happened, somebody would just you know past my view. Uh, it usually happens in your peripheral, and so in this particular incident, I saw a man who was wearing like a penguin suit, right? Like a old school tuxedo, the kind with the lapels are really hanging really low, and he looked really scary at the time. To me, he looked like what like would be Dracula, right? Because the only other time I'd ever seen somebody wearing that kind of clothes would be
Like
in
Victorian.
right? Because it was
Yeah, yeah.
like it was, and he looked very distressed, because oftentimes when you see a spirit, they will be covered in what is called deleterious fluid, right? It's literally like, if you've seen the movie Sixth Sense, right? And you know
Yeah.
how, which was really accurate, and I know for a fact that whoever it was who wrote that movie was somebody who was actually tapped in. But in that movie, whenever, yeah, oh yeah, because they got so many things right in that movie. That's a great movie to watch, to give you an understanding of what the mediumistic faculty looks like, because that's often usually how it happens, right? These spirits they'll come to you, and a lot of times it's not always when you choose, especially in the beginning, when you're opening up your, what they call your mediumship, right? Or in the movie they called it the sixth sense. But but back to the story. I'm sitting here. I'm just watching TV. Right. I'm watching Sesame Street, and out of the corner of my eye, I see, you know, this guy who was not there before, and he's wearing this tuxedo, and but he's covered in this like this fluid, which literally looks like, I think, well, it's, some people would call it ectoplasm, right? But in the modality of training that I use, we call it deleterious fluid, and it's it's a longer story of explaining what it is, but to but for the sake of time, it looks scary, right? It looks like you're covered with this goo, right? Like, or this slime that's partly transparent, but it's a little also got some, depending on the way you lived your life and the energies you've most resonated with, the colors can change. So for somebody, this person was probably not such a nice person, and the way that you can tell that is because the fluid that he was covered with had some browns, and like it was kind of like dark, right? It looks almost like a looks like goo, like a goo that's
Yeah.
got dirt in it.
Yeah.
So seeing that as a kid can be really scary. And in the beginning, what's that?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, no. So in the beginning, he's just walking around my house, but then, and they don't like they're not often aware of you, but once they become aware of you, they can, that's when things can become interesting, right? They can, depending on what kind of personality the spirit is, they could choose to, you know, be friendly, or they could choose to try to scare you. And in this
Wow.
particular instance, this gentleman tried to scare me, and he was quite scary. And so to get away from him, there was a window in the living room, and I decided to hang myself outside of the window so he couldn't see me. And my mom at the time was walking home from work. And as she's walking home from work, we had lived on the fourth story of the building at that time, and she just happens to see this 5-year-old kid hanging outside of the window. You
Your
know,
full body is outside, just your hands are
full
on the.
body outside, right? The building, yeah, the building at that time didn't have the screens or whatever. I don't know what the buildings were like in Chicago, but for that reason, that building didn't have a screen. It was just
Oh
simply
my
an open up
gosh.
window. Yeah, and
Oh my God.
yeah, and so she ran in and came in. I can still remember her freaking out, and she came in and grabbed me and pulled me out from the window, and that's just one of
And she
the.
understood, right? She understood what you were going through, right?
She did and she didn't, right? Because so my parents, even though the culture in Haiti is very, they're very used to that kind of phenomenon, my parents were Catholic. And so to them, because of the way they were raised, they demonized anything outside of angels and Jesus, and the very just traditional prayer, and
Mm-hmm.
was viewed as demonic. So in the way she was raised, was talking to spirits, was evil, right? And not something that was meant to be doing, because also there's voodoo, right? There's so many different beliefs, and belief systems and modalities that incorporate the what is mediumship. So some people, what is mediumship is talking to evil spirits, right? To other people, it's to some people, what's talking to angels is you're crazy and you're losing your mind. So it really depends on the way you're raised, and the kind of system of belief that you have. And for my parents, despite being people who were naturally gifted in this way, right? My mom had the same experience growing up as a child, but because of the way she was raised and because of what she believed in, it was viewed as something that would open you up to evil spirits, and so she shut herself off to it. And as so to them, so she didn't think I was crazy. To her, it was more so that she was afraid for my soul,
Right.
right? Like opening myself up to these realms meant that I was communicating with demons, and would then put me in a place to where I would be in danger of going to hell, right? And so that was more so where she was coming from. So they always believed it was happening. They just always thought that it was coming from someplace negative.
And how did you personally kind of navigate your way around with that? Like, how did you kind of focus and say, no, this is not demons per se, but this is just who I am. This is just what I have to do to kind of differentiate between these angels, between these spirits and spiritual guides too.
Like, how do you, yeah, piggybacking off what Alyssa's saying, like, because I would imagine if you're open to a certain level, a bunch of spirits are going to try to use you as a vessel and communicate with you, whether or not it's healthy for you, or whether or not they're good or bad, whether or not you know them or not. Like, that's just a lot of noise to sift through.
It's a lot of noise. I mean, nowadays, thankfully, I understand that there's a saying like that my shaman likes to use, and he says it's the way of darkness to act without permission, and is the way of light to honor your free will. And so nowadays, I understand that the ones that you want to work with will ask for your permission, right? They'll give you a heads up. They'll find ways to make it really very, very, very pleasant.
They're not trying to force themselves on you.
Right. And that even correlates to how it was for me as a child, right? It was always the way that, like, it comes with a feeling, you know? You can't rely on the feeling because the feeling itself can be manipulated. But early on, it was really, that's what it was, right? The ones that were cool were friendly, and they made it known very early in the game, you know?
Well, when you say, like, because I were talking about mediumship, and I think a lot of people are probably interpreting it as, and me too, like humans who have passed on.
Yeah.
But I, in my conversations with you, have asked you before, like, because you use these terms differently, and I know there are different things. What are the differences between spirit guides, angels, like specifically those two? Because I know humans fit into one of those categories, right?
For sure. So the difference between spirit guides and angels. So depending on who you ask, there's a few different answers. But I study spiritism, and the modality, and so my answers come from that schooling, right? That school of thought. And in spiritism, the really the difference, or the way that they are really designated, like the hierarchy, comes from the level of evolution, right? So in spiritism, they teach you in the beginning, somebody that you would call as an angel started off just like us, but through reincarnation, through a process of reincarnation, they evolved to a level, like to a grade, to where their spiritual maturity reached a place to where they had acquired enough, like living, like enough experiences over the course of, I don't know, probably thousands of reincarnations, and gotten to a level to where they had reached enough life experience and education to where they've just naturally evolved to a place to where their soul had grown to a frequency and a vibration that allow them to access the frequency, like it would be like an angelic frequency. It's like you literally growing your soul. So over a course of time, like a baby, right? In the beginning, a baby is it doesn't know a lot, but then as you get older, you develop a certain sense of knowing. In the spiritual realm, it's very much the same thing, but it goes a little further than that, because you start to develop you like your personality. You become sweeter, right? You become more patient. You become more compassionate, and so all those qualities are qualities that lend you to be in a place to where you can then steward somebody else in the physical realm. So, but to be more specific with your question, what is the difference between a spirit guide and an angel? Oftentimes, they're really one and the same, right? Because an angel is more of a it's more of a designation, right?
They are, like, for lack of better terminology, they're assigned to you,
They
and
so
spirit guides choose you. Is that what you've told me before?
well, so it's both, right? So you have what they would. So okay, so what they say in spirits.
Everybody has these, right?
Absolutely, everybody has at least an angel, and at least what they call a mediumship mentor, which is somebody who is specifically designated to assist you in developing that mediumistic faculty, right? And then you have a protector spirit, right? And then you have also a consoling spirit, right? And so you have at least those four things, right? guardian angel, a mediumship mentor, protecting spirit, and consoling spirit. And so your guardian angel is somebody that is exactly like you said. That will be so. Well, see. Okay, now I get to live in trickery, because you'll have a guardian angel that's been with you from your birth or your incarnation as, let's say, Molly, or Alissa as Rudy, right? And then once you lose this physical body, and then you're in the spiritual realm and you come back as somebody else, right? You may have a different guardian angel. But then you do have one specific guardian angel that has actually been with you since, you could call it the, like, let's say the Big Bang, right? Or what we call the first cause, right? Since your soul first began the whole process of reincarnation. And so in many ways you could say you have two guardian angels, right? One that's with you with a season or for a reason, and one that's with you for the entire time, until you finally get to a place to where you yourself become a guardian angel. According to Spiritism, that's the progression that we're all making, is we're all eventually going to become a guardian angel. Some people, it takes well, in the timing of that happening is different for everybody. It really just depends on how, like, the choices we make in life, right? How quickly you're willing to grow and evolve spiritually.
Because there really is something to when people call you an old soul, for example, or like anybody has this experience. Like I'll meet people and I'll feel, and maybe they're like, a lot of the people in my life are older than me, girlfriends, people I've dated, friendships, that kind of thing. But then there's a lot of people who have, I don't know, it's just, is there something to that, or is that just like
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So well, because of reincarnation, right? So the spirits talk about how you can never devolve, right? But you can stay at the same place, right? So like and I remember growing up, you would hear some people talk about how, oh, I hope you come back as a roach, or as or as you're gonna as a frog. According to the spirits, that's not possible.
but you could have been a frog before.
You could have been a frog before, yes. Definitely. But you won't go back to being a frog.
Yeah.
Once you've become a human, then in your next incarnation you'll be a human again. The thing is, though, is like, let's say you're somebody, like, you notice, like, so like you some people are just naturally just really sweet, and are just naturally really easygoing, and they don't trip, and like they just have that kind of
Just me,
mannerism about them. Right. Right, Alyssa, you're awesome, right? So you that speaks to the degree of of evolution that your soul is at, right? Where it's at, like, right, the level you're at, is because your ability to be that sweetness, or you just have a certain way about you that has naturally happened, because let's say in a previous life you had a really hard life, or something that taught you a lot of patience, or something that taught you a lot of compassion. That quality is going to carry on with you in your next life. So you'll have some people who, right, it's really hard for them to be nice, or really hard for them to be patient, or all these things. And a lot of that is because they haven't yet learned that lesson. But over the course of many reincarnations, you learn these different lessons, and you develop these different personality attributes over the course of time.
So is, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, good. Yeah, all good.
I just have so many questions. This is so intriguing, but I'm like, because I told you about this, Rudy. I had a past lives reading once, and for me personally, it filled in. It's things I already knew inside me about myself, but it confirmed certain dichotomies within myself, so that I no longer had to argue in my mind of like, wait, how am I this and this? It just gave me the answer, and it was like, okay, I am this and this, and that's that, and I can move on. But what I'm wondering from you is like, is our past lives readings, for example, something you would eventually do or want to do?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's one of the forms of mediumship is being able to do that, and that's actually something that we can all do. Like we all have access to it. So in Spiritism, they teach you that the human vessel is actually comprised of three different things. You've got your physical body, right, and then you have your soul, right, which the body is actually in the soul, and the soul is the part of you that is always the same, right? It's the part of you that so what we know as ourselves right now in Spiritism is really what they would call it a personality, right? Like it's a garment. It's like it's like a jacket that you put on and you wear it for 80, 90 years, however old you're alive. And then when you pass away, well, that's for another conversation. You hold on to it for a while because even when you pass away, you're still you for a hot minute, right? And then you reincarnate, and that's when you take off the jacket and you put on a different jacket. And so mostly, yeah, and they say in the spirit realm that you actually have a spirit team, and that you will, well, so that depends on how conscious you were in this life, right? Because they talk about, so what the spirits tell us is that when you pass away, you your subconscious becomes your conscious, right? So if you think about that, it's like most of us don't spend a lot of time, right? People run from their subconscious. So that's why the majority of spirits are actually like in a state of like they're actually asleep, right? Like they talk about how the spirits talk about how the majority of spirits, once they've passed away, are kind of like you're in a. So when you dream, when you go to dream at night, it's actually very much almost the exact same experience that you will have when you pass away, which is cool and kind of scary at the same time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because most of the time you're dreaming, you're just kind of like you're like watching yourself, right? Like you really have no control. You're just like going through the motions.
Yeah, but you've done a lot of lucid dreaming work. I know.
And that is so yeah, lucid dreaming is pretty that's amazing. That's also another practice. It's one of my most favorite things to study and practice these days
That's interesting because I
because
feel like I lucid dream very often. Like I'm very, very aware of my dreaming and can control things.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm a very
which is not easy to
cinematic.
do.
No, I mean, since I was little, I've had very lucid dreams. Like I'd be like, great, I'm gonna fly now because it's my favorite thing to do in my dream, and I can control it, and also I'm aware that I'm dreaming in a way. It's just like
Wow.
I'm not focused on it, but it's just like I know this is not real, but I'm completely in control, and yeah, it's not all the time, but it's common.
Which is, I mean, okay, so that's a really good thing because it's a muscle, right? Like to lucid dream, you have to have a really well developed astral body, and so there is something. So Alissa, the chances are, right, your soul is a pretty old soul, right, and you've developed that mechanism over the course of, right, thousands of incarnations, and so in this life that the wisdom or the knowing of your soul, right, which you really get to tap into when you go to sleep, is manifesting itself in your being able to lucid dream. Definitely, it's something that we could all do, right? Like there are definitely practices that you can do to help you build that awareness, but to be able to have a natural propensity for it really says a lot. So you can almost then pretty much assume, right, that when you do pass away, that you'll be more aware of it. Like you'll be able to wake up out of that dream state a lot more easily and quickly than than not,
Yeah.
so
And to get to that point, and I don't know if we're ready to talk about this yet, but it really interests me, and I can't wait to talk about it with you. But how does, because I felt like you were going to bring it up maybe, but how does ayahuasca play into that stuff? Because, you know, I could say that I'm aware of certain things in the lucid dreaming, but like I am terrified of doing anything that makes me that aware of myself. And I feel like ayahuasca is a huge, what is like, it propels that. It wakens that up, and I feel like that's scary to me. So how does that play into all of this?
So this is where, as like, if I were a shaman, I'd be like, so what do you think?
You are a shaman.
You are a shaman.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself yet, right?
Yeah.
I'm still just a baby in the game. But to stick to your question, right? How does ayahuasca play to that, right? Ayahuasca, wow. So ayahuasca, one, it gives you a lot of practice without, but still you maintain a lot of your conscious faculties, right? Because in the dream state, even right, people who are, I mean, unless you have a lot of practice with being lucid, which is that's a skill, it's a muscle, and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of dedication to really be able to get to a place to where you could even do that with any degree of sustainability, right? Because most people who become lucid, right, and you can share with me your own experience, it's only this, it's like there are different degrees of lucidity, and so you might be more lucid, but you're still kind of still like a participant, right? Which is where a lot of so the difference in it is in ayahuasca is right is the same awareness that you have now when you're awake, right? Or what we call awake, right? You will also have that's where you're mostly at in ayahuasca. So ayahuasca is kind of like being awake, but also in a lucid, but experiencing a lot of the sensorial things that happen while you're having a lucid dream, right? But it's like a light lucid dream.
So
Interesting.
is that like, because I have plenty of dreams where I know that I'm dreaming, but I also haven't been able to like Alissa, when you're like, I'm going to fly right now.
Yeah.
I don't remember moments like that, but I do have a lot of dreams where I'm like, I know this isn't real, but I don't know if that's not a lucid dream then, right? That's just like a normal.
Well, yeah, no, to a degree, right? Like there's definitely like there's levels of lucidity, right? Alissa might be at like level 5 or 6 or 7, right? Like her ability to be like, oh, I'm gonna fly right now and actually make it happen. That's a pretty high degree, right? But then you have everything else in between from the 0 to 10, and so where you might be at, and where most of us kind of, and we usually will, vacillate between all those different levels, where you'll be a little bit lucid or a little bit less. And so where you might be at, where you're kind of dreaming, but still you can't necessarily like make a choice and follow through with it. So you might be at level 2.
I've had like, but you know what? Now that like the areas where I've had the most, I still don't think it lines up with what you're saying, like a full on lucid dream is, but I've had like significant moments in my life always related to music, where I'll wake up. Like I'll never forget this one time. I think I was 17 or 18, and I was dreaming. I was talking to Abraham Lincoln, and he said something to me, like a one-liner. I don't know. He like, and it was, I was like, wow, that's so relevant to me right now. And I know that I'm asleep, and I know that I forget everything as soon as I wake up. And I in my dream, I'm repeating it over and I'm like, I have to remember this. I have to wake up and remember this right now because I'm going to forget. I woke up, remembered it, and then like I told my dad about it. And by the time I told him that story, I never remembered it again. I didn't write it down. But I've also had mornings or times where I've woken up. I've had an idea for a song in my dream, and I start singing it, and I wake up singing it, and I remember the melody that started in my dream, and it wakes me up, and I'm still singing it. It's really weird.
Well, Molly, don't forget, and if you should listen to this episode, Rudy, it's so good. But we did one on ghosts, and Molly had a visitation in her dream. That's pretty lucid.
Yeah.
That was the crazy. I told you about that, right, Rudy? I told it in one of the episodes, but one of my friends passed.
Oh, I do. I want to hear it again.
I'll be able to go over it fast, but it was like within 24 hours of her passing, and the next day, one night, it was a Saturday that I found out she had passed, and it had happened late Friday night. And then like I went to sleep Saturday night, and early Sunday morning, I woke up before my alarm, and I looked at the phone, and I was like, oh, I have 10 minutes left before my alarm. Sweet. I went back to sleep. And in that like little hazy area, I had my phone, everything was exactly as it is in real life. It was not a dreamlike state. It wasn't like, well, I was here, but I wasn't here. It was very real. I was in my room. My phone was on the charger. The light was the same in the morning light in my room. and my phone rings and it's her. And I looked at it and I knew that she was dead, but I also was like, well, but if she's calling me, I could still answer. So I'll never forget, in my view, I see my hand, I'm holding my phone and my hand is shaking, and I swipe it to answer the call. And it's like really staticky. And then I just hear her, and I'm like, Jackie, and it's really staticky. And then it clears up. And then she's like, Molly? And I was like, yeah, hi. And I had this conversation with her, I don't know, until my alarm went off. So I asked her where she was, and she was like, wow, laughing about it. She had a great sense of humor always. And she literally, her answer, she was like, I don't know. I just got here. It's crazy. I just got here. And I said, can you see us? And she said, sometimes. And I will never forget. This is right when I woke up, and I'm so mad. So she was trying to explain to me that she exists just as much now. And all of a sudden, I'm on this dirt road with her, and we're both walking. And there's these two men walking towards us, and they're in like old school, like period piece attire, dirt roads, but they have like walking canes, and they look very dapper. And they're talking.
That reminds me of Rudy's. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, it's like that type of outfit. Yeah. And they're talking to each other. And I get the feeling that like they can't see us. We're just observing. And she goes, do you see those two men right there? I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, one of them is alive and one of them is dead. But you can't tell the difference, can you? And they're conversing with one another. And I was like, no. And she goes, well, just guess. And I was like, I really had no idea. They look exactly the same. They look like twins. And I was like, that one's dead. And she like cracks up and she's like, no, that one's alive. And she's like, you see, we still exist. We're just on a different plane. Those were her words.
Oh my God, yeah.
And my alarm went off, and many other things that we talked about, and that message that I got in that dream.
Wow.
But that was like the single most incredible experience in my life. And it's at the pinnacle of my beliefs that I already chose to believe before that, but it gave me like, it's the pinnacle of my spirituality, my belief system, everything.
Wait, so what do you make of that? Like, Rudy, what do you make of that?
My God, that touches up on so many things, right? Because one, first of all, wow. Okay, when you dream, you literally like you leave your body, like your soul leaves your body and you go into the astral realm. And so her friend who was talking about how it's like very few things have changed. We're just on a different plane. It speaks to how the spirits talk about how when you pass away, you're still you, right? Until you reincarnate, you're still gonna be like, if you were somebody, like all the things that you liked and were really into, you're still gonna have those same desire to do all those things.
Yeah, and your same sense of humor.
Same sense of humor, right? Like the biggest misconception is that the people think that once you become a spirit, you're all of a sudden gonna be like your IQ is gonna go up, you're gonna have this knowledge that you didn't. No, you're exactly you. You've just lost the density of the physical body, right? But all of your isms and the things that used to get on your nerves, and like, you are still the same person. You're just now in this different realm.
Are you still have the same judgments? Like, are you still as judgmental as humans are?
Absolutely. Absolutely, you are.
So they really are looking down at us being like, you're a fucking idiot.
If they were that kind of a person. But if you were somebody who, right, because it's like the it's like life, they talk about like life goes on, right? You're just now in a different realm of like the laws of the universe has changed a little bit, right? Now you can walk through walls, and now you can see thoughts, and now you can bilocate, and you can travel at the speed of thought, all these different things that you can do now that you no longer have a physical body.
This knowing too, that seemed like, because one of the first things she said to me was, because this is like 24 hours after she passed or less, it's too soon for me to go to my family, but I can come to you and let you know that I'm okay and I'm happy. But she knew, I mean, I guess that's not a superhuman knowing. Any human would know it's too soon. But also, if I were, like, I'm very close with her mom now, and if I were her mom, mentally you're like, no, it's not too soon. Like, anytime you can come to me, so it's like she had this understanding of like, I can come to you right now. It's too soon for this, but like, I'm okay. I don't know, like you're saying you're human, but you also have some other tapped in.
So,
So you become so you do, like, so there are certain gifts that we have even now in our bodies that we don't have access to because of our own limiting beliefs, or we drink too much coffee, or you don't get enough sleep, right? There's like literal muscles. So once you lose the density of that human body, then those very natural, like not at all like the medium, like being psychic and being able to clairvoyant or psychography, any, like none of that. We've been taught to think that that's all supernatural, but it's absolutely not, right? It's as it's supposed to. What the spirits teach us, what other cultures, indigenous cultures, have taught us for millennia, is that all that stuff is actually very much a natural part of the human system. We just haven't learned how to use it, and so we kind of, like any, it becomes atrophied. So once you become a spirit, because you don't have this dense body, which is a lot of the atrophy or inability to access those innate gifts comes from that, right? Once you lose that dense body, you naturally tap into that. So there is a degree of knowing that is you will have as a spirit that you didn't necessarily have access to as in a human body, just because now you no longer have that physical body.
And what would you do? What would you say to someone who wants to work on that? Like, who wants to get more in touch with themselves, who wants to be more lucid in their astral form, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute
Okay.
sense. Well, the first thing I would say is, well, you have to be more lucid in your physical form,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because most of us are walking around and, we've, like, not to hate, right? But we're so myopic in our focus, right? We don't, like, we're stuck in our phones. We, like, a lot of people, like, like a really good example of that, right? Which is very common is, I'll use the story of how a wife cuts her hair and the husband who lives with her all the time doesn't notice, right? And then, like, a stranger that they have who hasn't seen her all week will see her and be like, "Oh, did you change your hair?" And her own husband will be like, "Oh, wow."
Are you talking about me? How did you know that?
Well, that's all of us, right? But it's those little things in life, right? Like, how are you living with somebody and not even noticing that they cut their hair? But it's because we practice being distracted. And so, so what I would say is, start taking the time to be more mindful, right? Start spending a lot more time. It's like, like that's why meditation is so beautiful. It's because there's so many things. Like, even us, right? Like, we're all psychic. We're all mediums. We're all doing all these magical things, but because we've got such a, like we're living in sensory overload where we've got all this this energy and information coming at us, we don't recognize it, right? So we're so focused on, like, what am I going to cook for dinner later on, what am I, you got into a fight with this one person, or somebody said something about you and you're obsessing about how it made you feel and you don't like it, like you're thinking of all these million different things. So few of us are actually taking the time to be like, if, like, when was the last time you stopped and paid attention to what your left pinky toe was feeling like, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, take a moment to just kind of be like, "Oh, what does that feel like? Oh, that's an itch," or "Oh, well, it's kind of tight,"
Yeah.
right? It's like, it's that level of sensitivity, or even something as simple. It's even simpler than that, right? Like, you're walking on the street and you are like, do you notice that the person you just passed by is, like, looking really sad and,
Mm.
looking like they just lost, like, are we paying it, like, it's what are we paying attention to? And most of us are paying attention.
We're taught to dismiss, though, even if we do pick up signals
yeah,
in society, like we're taught to dismiss those things as like, why would I assume he's having a bad day? I just walked,
right,
I don't know him. And
right.
you ignore it.
You ignore
Um,
it.
and
You don't even
it's
notice
scary
it.
how many times, because yeah, because I think of myself as emotionally and emotionally aware of myself, and therefore I
Yeah,
feel like I can read people pretty well.
yeah,
But then it's like, there are times where, and the times that I do say something when I might feel ridiculous, like I'll think of someone for no reason, even if I'm not around them, and text them like, "Hey, are you doing okay? I don't know. I
right.
just been thinking about you."
And that's another practice, right? To specifically to
Mm.
ask, like Alyssa asked, like, that's something you can do to start working on that. Like, when you think about that person, Send them a text, make them a call, because a lot of times, like we're always receiving these pieces of information, and the ability to sustainably tap into what, like where it is that gift or that antenna, right? It's like tuning into a radio, and the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. So that's why things like meditation and conscious breathing, like taking a moment to just become aware of your breath, and or just taking a moment to just like go inside and listen to your thoughts. Most of us are thinking all these millions of different things, but we're not really even, like, we're having all these conversations that you're not even present for, right? So in the beginning, just start being
Yeah.
present for your conversations. And in the beginning, it's going to be really noisy. It's like 5 different people talking all at once, and and that's okay. You start with that, because at least you're taking that first step of being aware of the
Yeah.
5 different conversations. For some people, it might be 12 conversations, and they might be all fragmented. But start doing that, right? Start taking a moment. Now start taking a moment to really dive into how you feel. We're so taught to run away from our emotions, right? Much less even feel anything, right? Like most people, if you ask them, so how you doing? Most people, they'll give you like a rehearsed answer, like, oh, I'm cool, I'm okay, right? But really, maybe they're kind of angry and kind of sad, or also kind of happy, and kind of like there's all those different emotions sometimes existing in you at one time. And so when you start practicing of really settling into and putting a name on every little emotion, right? Like feeling it, like allowing yourself to actually become micro aware of what it is you're feeling on all the different levels, right? Like, like more than just like a lot of times we'll have an itch and you're just scratching, right? You won't even pay attention to it, right? But then it's a lot, but it's how often do you actually sit there and actually feel the itch, right? Or which is like almost a dumb example, but it speaks to to answer your question, is how do you practice becoming lucid in those in your dreams or in your astral states. It becomes the practice is becoming lucid in this life, being very aware of, like, most of the times people will get angry, but they can't backtrack exactly where it was that or what it was that got them angry. And a really good practice is to literally sit there and backtrack what it was, because you most of the time you don't become angry all at once. It's been something that's been building. So if you can backtrack what it was that started to get you angry, then that faculty, right, that practice will help you become more aware of being able to decipher everything else that all of that like your emotional state, right? Of and once you're able to really dial into how it is you're feeling and what it is that caused you to feel that way, right? Then you also start paying more attention to what you were thinking, right? Because a lot of what you were thinking is what got you to feeling the way that you're feeling. And then that's literally a muscle. And so when you go to sleep, that same hyper awareness is going to follow you into the sleep realm. And it's a practice, and it's something that you could practice your whole entire life, but you get better at it over time. And that's how you can go from being somebody who is really easily triggered to somebody who doesn't react so quickly, like, you can see the shift, you can learn to become more patient. And that's also how you grow your soul, is how in this life, right? Like, you have kids who, started off, really angry, but if, through a course of meditation and working and yada yada, then, by the time they're in their 20s or 30s, they're less angry, right?
Yeah.
But it's a practice. And then that carries with you into the afterlife, right? All those tools and ways of dealing with your emotions and being aware of your thoughts, they also they follow you in every aspect. By the way, alright, you just reminded me of something that I feel like sharing. So earlier we talked about how when a lot of people see spirits, they're covered in this like goo,
Yeah.
right? And the color of their goo, right? I had said is dependent on the way they live their lives. So little things like that, like saying like I'm an idiot,
Uh-huh.
right?
Oh.
It carries an energy, right? That will. So the spirits talk about how we're swimming in an ocean of spirits, and there's something called the cosmic principle, which is like the what we're actually really swimming in, and
Mm-hmm.
so that gets charged with your thoughts and your words, and it literally it becomes like part of you. And so when
So
you say these things about, like you're saying, like you're speaking them into yourself, like you're
yeah,
speaking them to yourself, and it's it's doing something, right? Like, and it's becoming something.
more than if you just think it, because you can't always. You can be like, damn it, but if you like say it, it has more. Or is it the
Mm.
same to
Right.
think it?
It's like you reinforced it, right? And
Wow. I
so the existence, right? They talk about how you have an emotional body, you have a spiritual body, you have a rainbow body, an energy body, a causal body, a mental body, and so everything you think, right, goes in is actually being formulated in what they call the mental realms, right, which is another plane of existence that you're in, you're still in it, and it contributes to, like, it's co-creating a lot of the little things that are happening in your life. Like, for example, when you get sick, they talk about how the sickness actually started in one of the lighter realms, right? Like in the mental realm, it was because of something you were thinking, or
oh
even more so, which then turned into something you were feeling, and it's becoming more and more dense, and it's getting closer to your actual physical body. And if you think it enough and you feel it enough, you're reinforcing it until eventually it reaches a level of density to where now it's touching you, and then it manifests
wow.
itself as some sort of disease or some sort of sickness.
Mm.
It goes deeper and more complicated than that.
And
But that
we've
also
talked
is
about that before, about like just being kinder to ourselves.
yeah.
Right.
And but yeah, I mean, I can imagine like the ramifications of continuing, because I think more than Molly have that problem with this. Like, I always, like, I'm the first one to criticize myself. And
Yeah,
like
you do.
basically I'm like humbling myself. Not that I think I have this huge ego that I need to tame or something. I think it's just maybe a mechanism, or some sort of, I don't know, habit that I have, that make cracks me up. But like, who knows what it does to me,
Yeah.
on a bigger realm, in a bigger sense.
There's two things I love to say about that, right? And I'm mad that I'm forgetting his name, but there was that Japanese scientist who did that test where he took the water, right? He had a one glass of water, and underneath that glass of water, he wrote on a piece of paper. He wrote love on a piece of paper and put it and then put it in the water or underneath the water, and then on another piece of paper he put hate, and then he froze the waters, and then and a couple of hours went by. He took them out of the freezer, and then he looked at the waters under a microscope, and the glass of water that he had written love. And actually, he wrote a few different things. He wrote like love and joy and
Mm-hmm.
happiness. The crystals had formed into these beautifully symmetric and complex configurations, right? Like mandalas and just these
Wow.
beautiful, amazing like works of art. And then on the glass that he had written hate or anything negative, the not only did the color of the water, like, it looked all like brown and nasty, but the
Without a
crystal.
microscope, it looked that way.
No, with a microscope.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the molecules of water themselves were all like, they were all janky and just like, it like not at
Oh.
all symmetric. Like, it looked like craziness. Like, it looked, you could literally, they weren't as beautiful and
Mm-hmm.
artistic and well structured as the molecules that had all the positivity, had all the positive sayings on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so what his test proved is that literally be well the,
Intention.
the what's that?
In the intention.
Well, not only your attention, but the actual act of
Mm.
speaking onto anything, right, will carries an energy that is structuring our reality on a molecular level.
Mm.
And so if you think about that,
Mm-hmm.
that was just a glass of water. And since we're made up of, what are they saying, 90% water, right?
Right.
Yeah, so when you're thinking something, that same effect is happening on all the molecules of your body.
There,
And
there was one where a guy did that type of experiment with plants that I heard about, where he put like certain plants
right,
in one room, and every day he didn't write anything, but every day he went into those rooms, and in one room he would just yell that I hate you, I hate you, I hate, like, and then he'd go into the other room and be like, I love you, you're such a beautiful plant, and they thrived in the same conditions, thrived, and the other ones died fast.
Yeah.
It was like, I was like what?
energy
I
is
also
so crazy.
saw a thing of
It's a real thing.
tears
And
under, when you talk about the molecular structure, you've probably seen it too, Rudy. There's like a thing where tears are under a microscope, and there's a different like makeup of when you're crying, tears of joy, tears of grief, tears of so grief, joy, fear, and there were like 4 of them. And the tears, and they look entirely different under a microscope, not even like kind of the same, totally different. And it's the same water coming out of your eyes, and you like, it's amazing.
Wow. Definitely send me that, because I've actually I'm not aware of that. So, but yeah.
And I was going to ask you like what you would basically tell skeptics, but like everything there is a really good way to kind of let people know that energy exists, and there's something bigger than us, you know. Like I myself don't necessarily believe in a God, but I believe in us. I believe in energy. Because it's, I mean, even with the stories you just said, but I mean, with everything, it's just, there's so many signs out there. And I think maybe, I mean, you could speak to this more than I can. It's teaching, and maybe there's a way to teach people to pay attention to those signs.
Yeah.
Like with astrology, Jordan told us, like, whether you believe in it or not is up to you. It's still happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like when Rudy, you're talking about your soul, like you're not going to devolve, but you might not evolve. You could just stay the same if you're not making efforts to evolve yourself on a deeper level, which I know is what you're doing as a shaman, and I'm assuming is your goal as a shaman to help others on that path, because that's all we can do. I mean, or you do nothing. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? What Alissa asked about, you know, how do you speak to a skeptic, right? Somebody who isn't willing to believe, and that's probably one of my biggest challenges, right? Is how do I, and that's also, you know, the short answer would be like, well, do ayahuasca, right? And then we'll talk after that.
Right.
And not that ayahuasca is the end all be all. Right?
Or is it?
Well, the reason why I love ayahuasca so much is because it gives people what we call direct experience, right? Like, it's easy for me because, you know, growing up as a kid, it was my reality. It's my reality now, right? Like, even talking to you guys, there's things going on that I'm, you know, fielding and experiencing, right? Like, I don't share it because I would sound crazy and look crazy, and
I wish you would.
Yeah.
That's another conversation,
I know.
right? And eventually it will, like, you know, I mean, right now at the stage of where, I mean, without completely digressing from Alyssa's earlier question, right? It's for me, a lot of my training involves reopening myself up to, because I got to an age, and it's a story I can share with you later, where I closed it off, you know.
Oh.
But before even going back to that, we can circle back to that. But I want to go back to, you know, how do you deal with the skeptic? You know, there's a saying where, for those who understand, right, no explanation is required, and for those who are not willing to understand, there's not enough explanation that you can give them, you know. And but still, like, right, then how do you that doesn't apply to everybody. Some people are just not really ready, right?
Yeah.
They're just at a particular place in their life where it doesn't like, they could have an angel pop in their room and they will dismiss it. Right? They'll like, oh, I had too much coffee, or I was tripping, or they'll just find some way to not, you know, to dequalify it, you know. And to those people, you know, there's, you know, short of them having a near death experience, I don't know, there's really not much you can do. I think most of us, though, have, like, even Alissa, right? You don't believe in a God, so to speak, right? But there's, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? But there is something in you that feels like there's more to this than what you can touch, taste, and feel.
100%.
You know?
100%.
And I think that's as as to me is that's what you want, like, right, that's still the sweet spot, right? Getting caught up in trying to label it and giving it a title and wanting it to look like how somebody else
Right.
is seeing it is really, to me, that's superfluous, right? I think all that is really important is your relationship to that thing and what you choose to call it, and ultimately how well and how it motivates you to move in life, you know. I think, well, to put that into shorter words, is I think that really all that's important is just developing that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is because it, like, you know, developing that feeling, right? Spending more time with it, right? Asking yourself your own questions, right? And it might be as simple as, you know, sitting with yourself and being like and talking to it, right? As
Yeah.
crazy as that sounds,
Well,
you
you
know.
told me one time that, like, I always think of this because I had so many questions. We were at work or something, I had so many questions about like communicating with your spirit guides, because I love that idea, which I believe that like we all have them, and you have such like developed practices in your quest to become a shaman to like open up those communication channels and receive messages and ask for things. And I was telling you, like, you know, sometimes I just, if I think to ask for something, I get in my head and I'm like, well, that is it really that important? Like one time we were at work and I remember Rudy saying, we worked at a restaurant together, all three of us, for people listening. But Rudy, I remember you was getting to the end of the night and you wanted your shift to be over, and you came back from the back of the restaurant and you were like, yeah, just, you know, just sent up a quick plea to my spirit guides, like, please let this night be over. And I was like, wait, but are you serious? Are you joking? Because does it work like that? Like, because I have this thing in my mind where, like, if I'm going to ask my spirit guides for something, it's got to be some heavy shit. And you were like, and then you told me, which I always remember, you're like, no, they want to communicate with you. They want to hear from you. They want to talk to you. It's not, they're not sitting there judging the things you say to them.
Yeah, you know. So in short, absolutely, right? Like, you really want to look at them as being like, you know, your best friend,
Yeah.
right? You talk to them just like you would talk to anybody else, because at the first step, they at least want you to acknowledge, like, you just by acknowledging that there's this energy that exists, that you might not be able to taste it or touch it or see it, is going to open up the dialogue and create the space for you then to be able to experience it on a deeper level. And so in
Mm-hmm.
the beginning, it's just as simple as just acknowledging it, right? Even if it's just using your imagination, right? In the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
for like, because it's going to be very, because you have that cognitive dissonance, right? You have that part of you that immediately wants to dismiss it and be like, there's nothing out there. There's, you know,
Or
nothing's
like
really
I
happening.
roll at myself. Like, why would you talk to them about this if you had
Right.
a chance to talk to your spirit guides? But I'm like, what good does that voice do?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'll tell you what that voice does, right? It just further creates the disconnect. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And so, because it's a muscle, so now you're practicing that muscle. You're practicing the muscle of disbelief.
Yeah.
And so, if you want to feel more tapped in and start having more of these quote unquote supernatural experiences, the first thing you got to do is you got to create space for it. So, and even me, in the beginning, it's kind of like, okay, Mara, is this really like, there's always that voice. It's so
Yeah.
loud. A lot of it is conditioning,
Yeah.
right? That's a whole nother story. We could, you know, a whole nother conversation about, you know, the other forces out
I think we
there,
should just
the
have you
Wi-Fi.
on like once a month.
Pretty much.
Ha!
Yeah. Ideally.
I could use a practice, so
Ideally.
I'll take it. I'll definitely take it.
For real.
You know, but just practice it in the beginning, right? It's just like anything else in life. You know, the more you pay attention to it, then the better you get at it, the more you get out of it. You know, it's like the more you do
Mm-hmm.
push-ups, the stronger you get, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, the more you know, the better your body looks. And it's the same thing with talking to your spirit guides or becoming more clairvoyant. It's like, it's in the beginning, just start telling yourself that it's real, like it
Yeah.
exists, right? Or maybe just like like even asking yourself, all right, is this real? Like, just making space for the possibility of it.
Yeah. After you said that to me, which I think was like a year ago or maybe a little less, I made I make a point to do that. Like I remember sitting down at one point. I think it was New Year's Eve, like before I had to go to work, and I just was alone, and I just sat down, and I had like an intentional, like I've always written in my journal. I have these practices for myself, but I was like quieted all the voices in my head that are like, what do you think you're doing? You're being ridiculous. And I was just like, hey guys. I was like, to my spirit guides or whatever, like I want to, or angels or whatever it is, because when I had my past lives reading, she mentioned my spirit guides multiple times in context of like, oh, they're laughing right now because they say, of course, that, you know, like they're like in the room with me. And so I just decided to just go with that belief in that moment and like have a one-sided conversation or whatever, but like communicate and at least express the message that like I want to be in communication. I want to receive messages. I want to like go through this life together, like for the same purpose. And I have these are the things I want for my life. And if you guys are able to help me, like just kind of like also a combination of like making intentions and also communicating. But and who knows what I felt way more connected after that. And I continue to do that from time to time because of what you said. And I feel like it makes a difference. And I feel more supported by the universe. Things seem to fall into place in a way that they didn't before I did that.
Oh, you know, and I love hearing you say that, because what they don't teach us is that like it's like to tap into it, you have to choose to tap into it, right? Like you have to, what they call it, like you said, it's opening your channel.
Yeah.
So up until the age of 7, like as children, it's open. But then like because of the way we live life, and you start to, you know, you go through these experiences that teach you to not believe, and all these things, you know, you become less, you start paying less attention to, and just naturally, right, as our bodies become more, you know, more toxified with the foods we eat and the environment we live in, your ability to tap into those realms starts to diminish. But up until the age of 7, you're kind of open, and but then you start to close off to it, and so a lot of the work then becomes opening back up to it. And the way you do that is by giving it permission, right?
Yeah.
Like you literally, it would be cool if it was just like a valve that you could just pop open in your being. And in many ways, that's exactly what you're doing. But the way it starts is just by paying attention and having a conversation with it, acknowledging it, giving it permission to become part of your reality. Because, you know, a lot of the reason why people don't have these experiences or not tapped into it is because in many ways they are not giving it permission.
Yeah.
Some of us consciously, but mostly subconsciously.
Yeah. That I think that like that dream I had about Jackie, for example, I'm sure she couldn't connect with everybody in her life not everybody, but everyone she was close to, because it's not just her wanting to. I had to be like, I believe I'm willing to have this happen to me. I would imagine she can't just like work her way into everybody's dream, even if she loves them. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah, because it's exactly like you said. It's because you were open to it happening, and belief is, wow, I'd say it's like 9/10 of it, you know. And if you don't believe, then you've closed yourself off to it, right?
Yeah.
But once you believe, you're opening yourself up to it, and then now, and it's literally like you have created this antenna, right? Your belief is like, okay, now antenna go up, and then now you can receive that signal.
Yeah.
Because it really is. And so if you don't believe, then yeah, chances are you're not going to experience it.
Wow. That's amazing, Rudy. So what we do with our guests in every episode is we ask them about an SOS moment. And I'm sure you have a few, but like what ones like comes to mind when you think of like an SOS moment, a moment where you had to kind of like reevaluate your life and your path and re-examine things?
You know, I mean, I've had a few of those. But
Yeah.
the one that really stands out is I was coming out of, I remember it was a night that I was coming out of Umami Burger. And are they still even open? Umami
Yeah.
Burger?
Oh, they are.
I think so.
Oh, they are.
I mean, not during the pandemic, but in real life.
Right. I thought
Oh,
I took
right.
it.
Yeah. I just know we used to have one in Studio City that shut down. And so, yeah, I don't get out much, so I don't know. But this was back when I used to eat, you know, umami burgers, you know, so this is over 10 years ago. And I hadn't even done ayahuasca yet back then, right? I've only been doing ayahuasca for and almost just about 10 years, but only taking it seriously like in the last year, 2 years, right?
Oh, okay.
Only just became a shamanic
Since we've known
apprentice.
you.
Yeah. So right before I started working with Bottega Louie is right when I officially got accepted into the apprenticeship program with the shaman that I work with. But before that was really still just kind of figuring it out myself, right? Still understanding that I wanted to do something like this, but how and what and why, and reopening myself back up to the gifts and whatnot. But more specifically, so the SOS moment was, like 10 years ago, still, back then, still not so much, but eating a burger every now and again, still, doing the things that, we all enjoy, right? Drinking, smoking, it's definitely on a completely not on the path that I am now, right?
Yeah.
And so coming out of this umami burger, having this conversation with my buddy, which at the time we were actually we were talking about some rap video that was popular at the time, and as we're walking out, I remember coming out in the street. This is on Ventura Boulevard, and we were enjoying the air. It was summertime, and there was these two girls who were outside in the front of the restaurant, and somehow we got into a conversation with them, and then in the midst of the conversation, suddenly I start feeling really super anxious, right? Which is for me not common. I'm usually super chill, especially since back then I used to, smoke a little bit of that Sunny Chiba, right? So, but in noticing like, wow, okay, I feel really weird. Is this what a panic attack feels like? Because suddenly the girls I'm talking to, the words that everybody in the group it was myself and my friend and these two girls, everybody starts talking like in Charlie Brown when it's like that womp 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 womp, and I'm like, oh my god, what is going on here? Like
Were you high?
I had smoked maybe like 2 hours earlier.
Okay,
right? Right before we walked into Mommy Burger. So by then,
Yeah.
it was, I was barely high if I was high by then, but just feeling higher than you've ever felt in that moment. And so I'm like, wow. But I just knew I needed to walk away from the situation because suddenly everything became like too much.
Yeah.
I'm feeling these sensations that I'd never felt before, and so I start to I don't even have the wherewithal to excuse myself from this conversation. I just started to back up from the group and I start making my way down the sidewalk, and suddenly I start feeling everything close in on me, and I'm like, oh my god, what is going on? And I go to reach out to grab there was like a light pole on the side of the sidewalk on the street, and I go to reach out to kind of grab it to kind of stabilize myself because I'm starting to, everything is starting to come at me, and I did not even make it there. The next thing I remember is coming back to, and I'm half off the sidewalk, half on the street, and there's this Australian guy who's kind of like slapping my face and kind of like cradled my head. He's like, "Oh, you all right, mate? You all right, mate?" And I'm like, "What the heck?" But even right before that, I remember complete black, like darkness, just complete black, right? And then as I'm coming to, it was like I was coming from, like down and coming, and the light was above me, and then I suddenly come back into the light, and that's when I pop, and then that's when this Australian guy's, his face is in my face, and that moment was so strange for me, because in that moment of like from blacking out before reaching out, and mind you, I had never blacked out before,
Yeah.
even like having drunk and all that good stuff, you know what I mean? I was just never that dude. But between the moment of actually blacking out and then coming to being in that space of just like blackness and void and nothingness it reminded me real quick, because up until then I wasn't focused on that, right? Like my priorities weren't really about spirituality. I wasn't really reading all the books of, I wasn't, it was all about like what was going on in life, like You
Yeah.
know, what was I going to eat, working out, going to work? Where did I see myself in 5 years? You know, career. You know, there was really no
Mm-hmm.
thought to the fact that there was this other realm and like the spiritual realm and you know lucid dreaming and astral projection and the fact that there was anything outside of cars and movies
Yeah.
and work and women and drugs and all that, you know, none of that was
Mm-hmm.
really in my focus, even though that was how I grew up. I was just so far removed from that life. And
Yeah.
they even, you know, and but so being in that place where even though it was just for a few seconds of coming to that you know, from the blackness to waking back up again, you know, it was enough of the experience of was so powerful that when I came to, it really it reminded me that, oh my God, there's this whole other thing that's happening, and that is probably gonna that you're gonna have to revisit once you die, right? Like definitely back then I wasn't thinking about, like, well, most people don't, right? Most people don't think about
Right.
what happens after you die,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And so that experience forced me
I
to
think
think
about
like, oh
that
my
all the
God,
time.
yeah, you are better than I am. But
I
Molly, I
don't
tell
know
you that
about.
all the time. You know, for you're much more evolved than I was at your age. You know, the way
I don't
you
know if
think
that's
and the
the
things
case.
you
I
care about.
just think about what's next. Well, did that
I was
make like did
lost, you know
that
what I mean? I was
moment?
so lost, man, right? For me, it was like, you know, when's the next blunt, or you know, like I
Yeah.
just, right? I was, which is, I mean, not to judge myself, but that's where a lot of us are at right now, right? We're just not thinking about that stuff. You know,
No.
we're
Mm-hmm.
just thinking about, you know, how are we gonna survive, or you know, stuff. You know, most people don't worry about it because like they think it doesn't affect them, right? More people are more of
Yeah.
like, well, like I need to go to the gym because I need to take care of my body, or I need to go to school because I need to get a degree so I can get a job, and I need to get married, I need to get a life. Like you're thinking about the here and now, which is right,
Yeah.
which is necessary, but but most of us don't go beyond the real basic physical stuff, right? So you're not really thinking about
Yeah.
your aura or your chakras, or what's going to happen when you die or where you sleep, right? Most of us don't. And for me, I
Yeah.
was one of those guys with that particular stage of my life. But that experience, real quick, reminded me that there was this whole other level of consciousness that I was completely ignoring and wasn't
Yeah.
paying attention to, and 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 being that close to death, right? Of having blacked out where there was nothing, but then when you do, the first thing you see when you come to is just this void, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it was nothing, but it was something, right? Like I was someplace,
Yeah.
but I was not where
Mm-hmm.
I was moments earlier when I was on this sidewalk outside of this restaurant having this conversation with my
Mm-hmm.
friends. I was like someplace else, and mind you, I'd done mushrooms before back then,
Mm-hmm.
and you know had these experiences where you which also give you tastes of
Mm-hmm.
what's that like, but to have that quote unquote near death experience where it's so visceral and so all encompassing, and and in so many ways more real than what I had been experiencing in my quote unquote awakened life, it really it shook me,
Yeah.
and it made me like with like it was like suddenly this awareness of the fact that I wasn't paying attention to it, and that I probably should pay attention to it, was just there. And
Mm-hmm.
like all of us, so like literally my overnight, or in that brief second, my consciousness completely it went to a whole other level, where suddenly I was thinking about things that I never thought about, and aware of things that I had, you know, stopped being aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so then all of a sudden I was like, okay, all right, what was that? Right? It's clearly, you know, like I just had this innate knowing that this other thing, God, goddess, universe,
Mm-hmm.
right, Krishna, whatever you want to call it, suddenly it was like that other thing was like, hey, remember me? And all of a sudden I was like, oh
Yeah.
snap, oh yeah, hi, you know, and opening that doorway again, I couldn't, now I could no longer ignore it, because I very much had this experience, which to me I've really understood. Oh wow, so when I die, I'm gonna go someplace, and I need to start paying a little bit more attention to what that means. How am I gonna get there? What am I
Mm-hmm.
doing now that's probably going to affect where it is, or what happens when I do die? And so
Well,
that's once that woke up this hunger in me, that this curiosity in me, that put me back on the track of kind of, questioning again. Okay, so what was that stuff that used to happen to you when you were a kid? What were you saying? All those things.
Mm-hmm.
well,
That was
and
my
it
that was
reminds
that.
me of like talking to you, knowing you. I know that's like our ending question, but also people are in quarantine and they're not leaving their house, so they can keep listening. Because I wanted to ask you, like, you mentioned it's an umami burger, and I know your actual lifestyle in terms of your diet is like very strict, but like very specific. And is that a moment? Do you think that that anxiety that you were feeling was like the animal too? Because I had this really weird thing happen like a couple weeks ago where I was eating a turkey burger and I felt this like, and I'm not vegetarian. I could go pescatarian for sure. I'm like pretty much plant based, but I don't think. And I've watched all those documentaries, and I'm like, yeah, it's fucked up. But I still like some turkey and chicken. And I was eating a turkey burger, and I don't think about these things while I'm eating ever. And I got this like deep sadness like came on real fast, and I knew in my gut I was like, this isn't me. This is that bird. Like I can't eat. And I've eaten meat since then, but I couldn't finish that turkey burger. And I've never, I don't know, but when you brought up umami burger and then the anxiety you were feeling, and I know your lifestyle now, do you attach that to that?
So at the moment, um, okay, well, I'll go with what I know now, right? Is I want to say yeah, right? Well, yes and no, because what the spirits teach us is that those moments will happen because the current trajectory that you're at in your life is so, uh, it's so left of what your soul in the intended for you, the direction that your soul intended for you to live in, that you need something to kind of like course correct, right? Because
Mm.
what the spirits teach us about reincarnation, and so they say the whole purpose of reincarnation is while you're up there, your soul is deciding, okay, so I want this to happen, I want this to happen, I want this to happen, and I want this to happen. And the reason for that is so you can learn specific lessons that will assist you in evolving your soul, right? It's like okay, I
Mm-hmm.
want to learn what I want to have this experience so my soul can grow from it, right? And so when you then jump back into your body and you become Rudy, right? If your life is leading you in such a way that you're not going to have these experiences and you're not going to have to come to these awarenesses, the what will often happen, right, is your spirit team will create a situation that will kind of give you like a wake up call, where it's kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
knock knock. By the way, you were supposed to go on Route 101, but you over there like on Route 7, so we're gonna need to nudge you a
Mm-hmm.
little bit so that you can get back to Route 101. And those
Yeah.
experiences happen because of that. But to the other part of your question was, did it happen because of what I ate? It's there are many sciences, like spiritualistic sciences, that will absolutely say yes to that, because they talk about how, especially nowadays, is because of what's happening on a cosmic, right, global level, as most of us are naturally just becoming more attuned, right? Like so the spirits talk about how the
Yeah.
veil is being lifted, so our ability to access these frequencies, right, these experiences, this astral realm is much easier than it's ever been, because
Mm-hmm.
of this great awakening that this planet is happening is going through. And so, if you're an empath, right, which is somebody that feels things and feels emotions, a lot of people
Yeah.
are sensitive to it. And yes, a lot of, I mean, this is a bigger argument where a lot of people, are going to look at me and be like, really, you know, but we're really starting to begin to understand that how you eat and what you eat plays a direct role on how you feel and how you think. And so going back to that turkey burger and you suddenly feeling the sadness, there's a lot of evidence that points to how the way that as the animal is being killed, especially the way it's being killed, that's why now a lot of
Yeah.
places they're starting to exercise more humane practices of how they kill the animal. A lot of that
Mm-hmm.
gets trapped in the flesh, right? Like it's literally a chemical. Like right when you're scared, your body like this.
Yeah, that's why your tears look different when you're in different emotions. Like
Yeah.
changes your actual biological makeup.
Yeah. So if somebody was to, let's say, like an animal is scared and, and you kill it in that state, that biological makeup, right? That chemical,
Mm-hmm.
that pH of where it's at is going to then be trapped in the meat, right? Like
Yeah.
the meat is going to hold a record of its emotional state. And so
Yeah.
when you eat it, as beings who, because we're, like I said, regardless of whether you're aware of it or not, you're still doing this psychic thing. You're still
Yeah.
picking up on this. And that's why sometimes you ever walk up to somebody and you just, for whatever reason, you don't like them. You don't know why. Somebody you met for the first time and you're like, you just have this feeling
Yes.
about them, like you,
Yes.
or vice
Yup.
versa. Somebody you just, right? Or sometimes it's somebody you love is right off the
Yeah.
Yeah.
bat. It's because there's some sort of information, right? A lot of spirits would say it's because in the past life that person was an enemy, and your soul is picking up on that
Mm.
and you're recognizing it. But really, it's just to speak to this technology, right, that our bodies have, where you're just picking up all this information, and it lends
Mm-hmm.
itself to the food we eat, to the music you listen to, right?
Mm.
The all of that, everything carries a frequency, right? Like it's all vibration, and that
Yeah.
vibration is like your body translates it in a myriad of different ways, and one of the ways that we experience it the most is by the foods we eat. And so it's not uncommon. I mean, that's why, when you drink, you're right, the reason why you'll have all these different emotional states, because the alcohol will open you up to and give you a certain degree of sensitivity. It also numbs you in the same amount of way. But long story short, yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a very good chance that the reason why you suddenly became sad once you ate the turkey burger is because of the energy that was trapped in this poor little turkey, right? When it was
I
slaughtered,
So
know.
sad.
it was transferred into you.
And it felt like a foreign, like somebody else's emotion. It didn't feel like, oh, weird, I just got sad. Like I knew it wasn't my emotion. It was really weird.
That is
I
weird.
sound crazy.
No. I had a similar experience. Like I had a Popeyes chicken once, and it was the only time I've ever had Popeyes, and I threw it on the ground. Like I was so dramatic. I was at the Popeyes with my friend, and I was like, I'm never eating chicken again. I was a vegetarian, and it lasted maybe 8 hours because I'm a meat eater. But I was so disturbed by the feeling I got by eating that.
Yeah.
That yeah, I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And
I
I have to
really,
say, right, mediumship, right, so being an intimate is you, so actors, musicians, people who are the creative types, there's a reason why you chose those careers. Is because, and they will like not something, and seriously, it's like 98% of people who are those creatives, those artists, whether it be a singer or a painter or an actor, you're mediums, and that's what allows you to do what you do. And so
uh-huh.
that's why you can go into those roles and access those different characters, and you have this
Yeah.
natural sensitivity that you came into the world with, and so you're choosing that career is the way you're looking to express that
Well, it
muscle.
feels like a channeling.
Mm.
Yeah, it feels like a channeling, like you said, if that's your access to it as an artist. Because a lot of times, well, like those dreams where I'll wake up singing, or which has only happened a few times, but a number of songs of mine, and I always know which ones they are because it's like the whole thing is done in 15, 20 minutes, completely, fully formed. And I feel like it wasn't me. Like I opened my mouth, but it was just like coming through me.
Yeah.
But that's
I
kind
mean,
of
there's a
what
guy named
like mediumship is for you.
Oh, well, I mean, that's it, right? And it's different for everybody, right? Because mediumship is happening through the filter of our perspective, our experiences in life, right? Our limiting beliefs. And so, it's the energy is the same, but the lens of how it goes from the astral, the spiritual, to 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 us receiving it and then being able to translate it depends on, it's different for everybody, because we're all having different experiences,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And but very much so, the way we create as artists, the that creative stream, right, that creative flow is mediumship, right? The
Mm.
spirits talk about how a lot of the insights and the ideas that people have are being fed to us by from the spiritual realm. You know, I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, oh wait, so like everything that I come up with is really like not my own idea, you know? And that's not exactly so, but that's kind of like how they say it, right? They say the
Mm-hmm.
inspiration comes from someplace else. And when you can most, like the proof, the biggest experiences we ever have of really being able to see for ourselves whether that's real or not, or like when you said, right, when you have these moments of where you're like channeling this song and it's you're done with it in 15 minutes, or you have these crazy ideas. Or for me, when I'm really tapped in and I can't remember what I just said, right, and
Yeah.
and the words just flow. Like right now, listening to myself talk, I'm like all fragmented, and it's gonna, it's I'm a little shy, so it's hard for me to really articulate what it is I want to say, but when I'm in mediumship, and I'm talking to other people, it's and usually as you get better with it, you can almost kind of watch yourself as it's happening, but
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
this fluid stream of consciousness, and the words are very fluid, and they're very simple, and they come out very articulate, and
That's how
just
you
very
strike
poetic.
me, even in this conversation and in normal life. So I would love to see you in like mediumship, because you're very, like, very eloquent, and
Yeah.
Oh,
especially to
100%.
explain something like this, which is
oh, yeah, I appreciate you saying that.
everything. It's like multifaceted. It's not like explain what an accountant is. Like you're,
Yeah.
It's
I'm
like, I'll be
I'm
honest, like it's for me
enthralled.
it's challenging because I've got the camera and
Yeah,
the
I know.
phone and the electronics, and so there's all that, and then there's the part of you that's like, oh my god, what do I sound like on the camera? What do I sound like on the phone? And going back to your question too, that Alyssa asked earlier, is like, how do you practice, getting into that state? Well, so me having all those thoughts and judgment of myself are exactly what you don't want to do, because that keeps you from being able to tap into it, and
Yeah.
so the more relaxed you can be, the more you can let go of judgment, and the more open that channel becomes, and then a lot of that can flow through you. So that's why I was saying, for me, that the best practice that I can do is having these types of Zoom calls and these conferences and talking to people, because
Mhm.
then it's going to teach me to let go of all of that stuff.
Right.
It's easier when you're
You've already learned how to tune out other spirits, but now you need to tune out like earthly things that
yourself.
are in here.
That's
Yeah.
the first one, right? That's actually the
Yeah.
first one that you have to turn out. Is learn how to let it go, right? That's where ayahuasca becomes so easy, and that's where as a ayahuasca shaman, it's much easier, because the ayahuasca then helps you with that, right?
Mm.
It helps you tune out all that other stuff, and it also helps you tune into a lot of other things, because your consciousness expands, but you're more tapped into the frequency of your higher self and your heart, and so it's easier to leave a lot of that stuff behind.
Yeah.
But the real work for me comes, because for what I want to do in life, I'm not gonna be taking a sip of ayahuasca before I talk to anybody or get on a phone call. And so this next level of my training, as I become more sensitive to all these other things, also becomes becoming more grounded,
Mm.
and becoming more more confident in myself, and less judgmental, and able to stay like centered and stay focused while I'm doing all this stuff, because it's super
Mm.
easy when you're out in the desert, and you're in a
Yeah.
cave, or you're in the jungle, or it's one on one, and you're both on ayahuasca or mushrooms, or if it's just you're in a quiet place. But moving forward in the future, what's really going to be called for is for people who want to do this work, is to be able to get on a phone call like this and talk to a group of people. And so that's why it's so important now for me to develop that level of awareness, to where I can stay, to zoom out or
Yeah.
zoom in,
Zoom in and zoom out.
Yeah.
Well, and like
Yeah,
like
exactly.
kind of staying in your human self, because I know that that's like those situations you're describing, which are the ideal ones where you're in a cave or you're in the jungle, you're one-on-one, or you're on ayahuasca ceremony, or but like you're saying, if your goal is to help, well, yourself and others evolve spiritually, and but part of that, I'm sure, is like acknowledging and honoring the fact that you are living a human life right now.
Right. So that first level is, um, okay. Yeah, I did lose my train of thought, but well, but I
Um,
mean, but really, I guess what I can wrap up with is for me, the understanding of the necessity to really ground myself in like in everyday life, right? Because as a
mm-hmm.
shaman, you have or as you can, there's people who do this kind of work can become really spacey, right? And they become
Yeah,
really
that's what you were talking about.
unrelatable,
Yeah.
right? And you can kind of like lose touch with quote unquote reality. And I myself, I can speak to that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can become somebody who people can't relate to, and you become really weird. And I was definitely, especially recently, going through that kind of phase where you're so sensitive, you can't do anything, everything's coming in. I don't know how to talk to people, I can't be around people, all these other
Mm-hmm.
things, and so the one of the things that they really remind you as you are like in receiving this shamanic practitioner certification is that part of the training requires you to be really grounded and really aware of the everyday life. And so for me now, a lot of a lot of my practice now is around, right, it's talking to people more, having more of these conversations, so I can really become more fluid with being able to, both be this guy, right, that's also experiencing all these things while I'm talking
Yeah.
to you and
Mm-hmm.
seeing all these different things, but still be in a place to where I can like share the experiences with you in a way that you can then take them and apply it to your life and be have a better human experience, because
Mm-hmm.
if I can't do that, right, like if I can't dispense this information, if I can't speak to things in a way that people can understand and be relatable, then it's like, what's the point, right? Then I'm then
Right.
I'm then I'm just this guy who's talking to ghosts who looks crazy and
Mm-hmm.
like not like really, because at the end of the day, right, it's like we came here to have this human experience, to be in a body,
Right.
you know
For a
and
purpose.
Yeah.
for a purpose. And it's really easy to get caught up with, oh, I'm talking to angels and, seeing spirits and, I'm astral projecting and I'm going to different realms and having, all these cosmic experiences. But then I get on a phone call like this and I can barely and then it becomes difficult to be able to ground that experience in such a way that it can become real and relatable to everybody else. And that's
Yeah.
what it's really all about, as a shaman. It's like, it's really what can I learn that I can, what tools can I acquire that I can then share in other people's experiences to help them have a life that's more loving and more positive and more present, and
Yeah.
that's ultimately that's what it's really all about.
I mean, I'm sure I can speak for Molly too, but you've done such an amazing job articulating everything, and we can't
Yeah.
thank you enough. You have,
Rudy,
you really
seriously, I'm
have.
like so enthralled, and I already know, of course we'll wait for people to hear it, but if you also are open to doing more of these, because like you say, you want to start to work on that type of practice to transmute that knowledge or wisdom or thoughts or anything to more people, I, for one, would love to have you on in the future to dive deeper into certain aspects of that.
Yeah, please come
I
back.
would love to. Yeah, I would
And
definitely
would it
love
would
to.
be in person, because this quarantine won't be forever. Or will it? We don't know. But it will hopefully be in person.
Oh well, we'll see, right? There are definitely many
So
different schools of thought on that.
Yeah.
we won't have
Yeah.
the technical glitches, which for those listening, sorry if things cut out or if it sounds fuzzy at points. We're on a 3-way Zoom call
We're
with
gonna be
three different mics, and
yeah, but we're working through it. We're doing our
Right? No,
best.
I think you guys did great. You guys are amazing.
We love you, Rudy.
Um,
thanks,
Thank you
Rudy.
so much for
oh,
being here. Thank
love you
you.
Thank
too.
you.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Definitely honored that
Oh,
Oh yeah.
you
wait.
guys would even think to have me.
Yeah.
Before you go, if our listeners do want to reach out to you with questions, or maybe for like to work with you in some capacity or just to communicate and ask you things, would you be willing to give an email address or some way for them to contact you?
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, definitely. That's like the number one. I mean, right now, even at at my level of training, I can at least talk to people, and
Yeah.
as a medium, it's really just all about listening and letting the information flow through me. So that I feel really confident in being able to do. So for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So
yeah.
what's your email?
I was gonna say that.
My email, okay, yeah, that part. It's Roody, Roody, Bonnaig, B like boy, Onnaig, @gmail.com.
And we'll put that in our show notes and in our social media.
Yes.
So, just in case you didn't catch that at that time, we will have that ready for you guys to maybe reach out and
with questions. Also reach out to us, and because we will have Roody back on, so certain areas you want him to go more in depth with, let us know. Roody, all of my gratitude. Thank you so much.
Love you, Roody. Thank you.
Likewise. Alissa, Molly, love you guys. So much gratitude. Thank you. And
thank you. I love you
guys.
So for today's episode, we are promoting, it's called the Society of the Indigenous and Ancestral Wisdom and Healing. And I thought this, went really well with our topic today. So the Society of Indigenous and Ancestral Wisdom and Healing is dedicated to offering public education in shamanism, contemporary disciplines, and healing modalities for enhancing the well-being of individuals, humanity, and planet Earth. They invite Indigenous shamans from diverse cultures and traditions to share their practices and provide a forum in which a deeper dialogue may take place about healing, the transformation of consciousness and wholeness on a personal, communal, and planetary level. They explore new ways of healing and educate the public about the importance of shamanism by holding an annual conference on healing and transformation. So to donate, please visit shamanismconference.org/donate.
Beautiful. That's such a good one. For next week, I am so excited to share this. So I've come to understand that the most interesting thing about myself is my parents. And so if nothing else, this quarantine has given us all the opportunity to really examine what it is we normally spend our days doing. Like, what career or job have we chosen that has us running around from dawn till dusk? Is it worth it? Is it fulfilling? If you could dream up a new daily life for yourself after quarantine, what would it look like? Well, our guests next week asked themselves those very questions years ago, quit their jobs in their 50s, and moved to Africa. It's my parents.
Yay! I was going to do a drum roll.
I know. So they share their story. They have many of them, but specifically the journey of deciding at 50 something, I forget, to go on leave of absence, and then they're following from there, quit their jobs and just pursue a dream they've always had, change what their life looks like, and proving that you can do that at any point. They share their story, their philosophies on pursuing fulfillment and happiness at all stages of life. So we can all take notes from this right now. I know there are literally millions of people at home right now really asking themselves if, when things go back to normal, what they want that normal to look like. And you have more control over it than you probably accept. So it's inspiring, it's beautiful, it's exciting. So please listen to them next week. Join us.
I can't wait.
I'm so excited.
So excited to hear these stories. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Again, we're up on YouTube, baby. So check us out. Search for SOS with Molly and Alissa to see our beautiful faces. I'm in my apartment now, not the studio. It's kind of a change of scenery. You can see some of my plants. And
exactly.
Follow us on Instagram at the SOS Pod. Follow us on Twitter, same handle. Follow us. Rate us on Apple Podcasts, 5 stars.
Please.
Leave a review too. It helps the algorithm and reaching out to more people.
And seriously,
so thank you so much. Here's to turning meltdowns into magic.